5:12 local time. The first warning did not come from the sky. It came from the water. Two US Air Force A-10 Thunderbolt IIs were already flying low over the eastern Strait of Hormuz, moving west through the pale light before sunrise. Below them, a US Navy destroyer was escorting commercial vessels through one of the most crowded and sensitive waterways on Earth. From above, the sea looked calm, dark blue, slowly turning silver under the first light of dawn. But inside the ship's combat information center, the picture was changing fast. Three separate surface contacts had suddenly shifted speed and direction at the same time. That was not random. The lead A-10, call sign Hog 1, stayed just above the morning haze, low enough to keep the water in sight while still watching the wider area. His wingman, Hog 2, held slightly higher and to the right, covering the shipping lane below. There were no long speeches on the radio, no wasted words. Multiple fast contacts accelerating north of the traffic lane. The destroyer did not suddenly turn away. That was the first sign everyone understood the difference between uncertainty and panic. The ship held its course, staying with the merchant vessels while the CIC sharpened the picture. Bearings updated, speeds updated, closing distances updated. On the bridge, lookouts searched low against the glare. In the air, Hog 1 eased the nose down and descended for a closer look. The Strait of Hormuz leaves almost no room for mistakes. The lanes are narrow, the coastlines are close. Small boats can disappear into background clutter, until the situation changes all at once. From altitude, a harmless-looking wake can become a serious problem in less than a minute. Hog 1, Navy contact, push lower, confirm intent. Copy, coming down. The A-10 dropped another few hundred feet. Through the white canopy, the pilot now had a hard, clear view of the water below. The destroyer cut through the channel with a bright white wake behind it. Gray hull steady, controlled and unhurried. Then the first fast craft appeared off the port side farther out. Narrow black shapes moving hard across the water. Even before the details became clear, their movement told the story. Fishing boats drift, turn and hesitate. These boats were driving straight into position. Then two more contacts appeared from the north, then three more. The destroyer's CIC updated the count again. More trucks were emerging from nearshore clutter, as if a scattered civilian pattern had suddenly turned into something organized. And that changed everything. One fast-moving group could still be tested. Multiple groups converging at speed meant the time for uncertainty was disappearing. Hog 2, I've got additional wakes north side, count increasing. Copy, I see them. The sun was just breaking the horizon now, casting long golden light across the strait. From a distance, it almost looked peaceful. But underneath that calm surface, the tactical picture was getting worse. One group angled toward the outer edge of the commercial lane. Another stayed wider, almost like a screen. A third accelerated late, as if waiting for the others to draw attention first. Still, the destroyer held. Sensors tightened, tracks were sorted. Contact quality improved. It was the kind of calm that only exists when everyone inside that ship has trained for this exact moment. Hog 1 dropped lower again, and then he saw what he needed to see. Visual on lead fast boats, combat fittings confirmed. Now it was no longer theory, no longer a questionable radar return. The pilot could make out mounted systems on the lead boats. Their hulls slammed across the water, throwing sharp white spray as they closed on the convoy lane without turning away. Below, the destroyer issued its first warnings. The calls went out over the radio. Controlled, procedural and clear. No response. The ship stayed between the incoming boats and the commercial traffic, exactly where it was supposed to be. The merchant vessels kept moving forward, slow and heavy, trapped inside a situation they could not outrun. Hog flight, surface contacts inside warning envelope. That phrase changed the air picture instantly. Hog 2 widened out to cover the northern side, watching for any boat that might split towards civilian traffic. Hog 1 stayed locked on the nearest group. The A-10 was not built to be elegant. It was built to be stable, tough, and extremely effective at low altitude, right where intentions become visible. Over open water, close to ships, it could read movement faster than almost anything designed for cleaner, higher altitude fights. Then one of the lead boats changed heading. Not away. In. The lead boat turned directly toward the convoy line and pushed harder, its wake stretching flat behind it as the engines came up. Two more craft followed the same move. Not perfectly, but close enough to make the pattern clear. This no longer looked like simple pressure. It looked like a coordinated threat taking shape. Inside the destroyer's combat information center, the numbers tightened. Ranges dropped. Closing speeds narrowed. On the bridge, the ship still looked calm against the sunrise, but every second now mattered. In Hog 1's cockpit, there was nothing left to question. The pilot rolled left. The A-10 dropped into position over the Strait of Hormuz as the first fast boats pressed toward the lane below. The turn began before the radio call had even finished. Hog 1 came down with the left wing low and the nose steady, the A-10's broad, straight wings holding firm in the pale morning light. Below, the lead Iranian fast craft was no longer moving like a patrol boat. It was charging toward the convoy lane, bow slamming into the water, white spray breaking outward as it cut between the wakes of slower commercial ships. To the north, two more boats widened their spacing, trying to make the situation harder for the destroyer to read. But the U.S. Navy ship stayed disciplined. No rushed maneuver, no uncontrolled response. The destroyer remained exactly where it needed to be, between the incoming threat and the escorted traffic. Inside CIC, clean range calls and bearings moved across the network, while lookouts on the bridge kept their eyes on the boats through the rising glare. Behind the destroyer, the merchant vessels continued forward. Slow, heavy, exposed. They were already too deep in the channel to do anything else. Hog 1, Navy contact. Warning pass authorized. Copy. The A-10 did not use force. Not yet. Instead, Hog 1 drove low across the lead boat's projected path. Fast enough to send a message, low enough to make that message impossible to ignore. The aircraft tore over the water in a hard pass, its engines rolling across the narrow strip of sea like thunder. From above, Hog 2 saw the reaction immediately. One boat checked speed, another shifted slightly off course. But the lead craft did not turn away. It pushed forward again, as if testing whether the American aircraft was only there to intimidate. It was not. Hog 2, North Group still closing, one splitting port. That changed the picture instantly. The formation below was no longer moving as one single rush. It was starting to branch. One boat stayed committed toward the destroyer's forward sector. Another cut wider, angling toward the outer edge of the convoy line. A third stayed back just far enough to keep both the ship and the A-10s watching it. The destroyer raised the warning level. Radio calls, signal procedures. Every step was controlled. Every second made the distance between restraint and action smaller. Then Hog 1 came around again. The pilot kept the turn tight but measured. He resisted the urge to rush. Over open water, inside a crowded channel, discipline mattered more than speed. Civilian ships were too close. Friendly positions were shifting by the second. The A-10's advantage here was not elegance. It was visibility, stability, and the ability to stay in the fight. Hog 1 could read the wakes, the spacing, and the intent. Below, the lead boat crossed another invisible line. Then a brief flash appeared near its bow. Not a full exchange, not yet, but it was enough. A short burst hit the water ahead of the traffic lane, throwing a line of spray across the convoy's path. At the same moment, another fast boat turned harder, using the confusion to shift south and pressure the shipping line from a new angle. Inside the destroyer's combat information center, the geometry was now clear. There was no more doubt. Hog 1, cleared on lead hostile craft. The answer came instantly. Copy, in hot. The nose came down. Inside the cockpit, the pilot centered the fast boat through the HUD as the sea and sky narrowed into one tight corridor. The target bounced hard over the chop, still moving fast, still committed, trying to beat the angle closing from above. Hog 1 stayed calm. No wasted movement, no dramatic correction. Just a clean, disciplined run over a narrow strip of water where one bad second could put the wrong vessel in danger. Hog 2 remained offset, watching for any secondary move. The wingman's voice came across the net. "Port flanker still moving. North group unstable. You're clear on lead." The sight picture settled. Then the A-10 released a short, controlled burst. Not a long cinematic display, a precise hammer stroke. First, the water erupted around the fast boat. Then the line walked onto the craft as the pilot held steady for just long enough. The boat tried to break away, hard to starboard, bow throwing spray. But the turn came too late. The hull shuddered. Its speed collapsed. One side dipped lower into the water, and the clean wake behind it broke apart into drifting foam. Lead craft stopped. Lead craft stopped. But the encounter was not over. The moment the burst ended, Hog 1 pulled up and away, climbing only enough to clear the line and rebuild the surface picture. Below, the damaged boat was drifting broadside, low smoke and spray hanging over the water behind it. One of the remaining boats broke wider, clearly shaken by what had just happened. Another accelerated instead, trying to use the confusion and the closeness of civilian traffic as cover. The destroyer shifted again. This was no longer only posture. Defensive systems were now tracking live contacts. The escort formation tightened around the convoy lane. From the ship, lookouts could see the stopped craft drifting behind the action, while the remaining fast boats seemed caught between two choices: scatter or commit. Hog 2, flanking boat continuing south. I have it. Then the strait changed again. The destroyer's voice returned over the net, sharper this time, not from the bridge, but from deeper inside the ship. Multiple shore-based radar emissions detected. For a fraction of a second, no one answered. Then Hog 2 looked inland. Along the coastline, beyond the haze and the rising light, new returns were building where none had mattered seconds earlier. Search systems, tracking systems, layers of activity waking up. The confrontation on the water was no longer isolated. The first craft had been stopped, but the larger network behind it was coming alive. Hog 1, the wingman said, voice flat and controlled. I've got new airborne contacts lifting inland. The sea encounter had just become something much bigger. The damaged boat was still drifting when the entire formation changed. What had started as a direct rush was turning into something far more dangerous. The remaining Iranian fast craft no longer moved as a single group. They split wide across the water, separating by angle and speed, forcing every eye in the battle space to work harder. One turned north and opened distance, as if trying to break contact. Another cut sharply south, using the glare and the clutter of commercial wakes to hide its next move. A third stayed on a shallow line toward the convoy lane, not rushing, not retreating, just applying enough pressure to keep the destroyer fixed in place. Above them, Hog 1 leveled low over the strait, climbing only enough to rebuild the full picture. Hog 2 stayed offset to the north, wide and scanning. Half the fight now lived inside his cockpit. The first engagement had stopped one boat cold, but it had not ended the threat. Below, the US destroyer continued holding formation with the merchant traffic, but the geometry was tightening. The ship could not simply accelerate ahead and leave the slower vessels behind. It had to shield them, track the boats, and now account for something new, building beyond the coastline. Multiple surface groups maneuvering independently, CIC called out, calm and precise. That was the problem now. Independent movement. The boats were no longer offering a clean lead target. They were pulling attention apart, forcing the ship and the aircraft to divide their focus. Hog 2 swept his eyes north and caught fresh wakes forming near the edge of the coastal haze. Small at first, then more. Their lines sharpened as they accelerated west of the nearshore clutter, pushing out from the Iranian side in a wider pattern than the first wave. Not one spear, a spread. Hog Flight, I have additional contacts north side. Count increasing. The strait was becoming crowded, fast. The sun was fully above the horizon now, laying hard gold across the water. But the light only made separation harder. Civilian hulls reflected the glare. White wakes overlapped. Dark fast boats appeared and disappeared between larger ships. Every pass had to be cleaner now. Every decision had to account for who might cross the line a second later. On the destroyer's bridge, there was still no visible panic. The ship angled just enough to keep its protective position near the convoy. Its wake flattened briefly, then built again as it adjusted. On the exposed decks, crew movement tightened and then vanished as the vessel shifted deeper into combat posture.
Most of the fight was happening where it always began first, inside CIC. Across the radios, in the bearings, ranges and closing speeds that decided who had time to make the next move. Hog 1, nearest south contact is tightening toward the lane. North group remains uncommitted. Copy south contact. That south-running boat was now the immediate problem. It was using the merchant traffic well, never staying on a perfect line long enough to make the solution simple. Hog 1 banked and descended again, easing the nose toward the target. The A-10 was working exactly where it was strongest. Low, stable, and close enough to read intent through movement. But the air above the water was no longer clean. "New airborne picture unresolved," the destroyer called. Not a confirmed threat. Not yet. Just unresolved. But that was enough to change how both pilots thought. Hog 2 looked inland again. Far beyond the surface engagement, the coastline no longer felt quiet. Radar behavior had shifted. The sweeps were sharper now, more deliberate. Something over there was watching the strait. And the A-10 pair was too low and too committed to ignore it. Still, the boats below kept forcing the issue. The southern contact broke harder toward the convoy line. That move collapsed the timeline. The destroyer could track it, the ship could warn it, but with merchant vessels nearby, angles mattered, and seconds mattered even more. Hog 1 made the decision before anyone had to say it. "In hot, south contact." He rolled in low. The boat below was smaller than the first target and moving erratically, skipping across the chop in tight corrections, trying to disappear inside the layered wakes of the commercial traffic. Hog 1 held the nose steady anyway. No dramatic dive, no wasted radio traffic. Just a pilot walking a narrow line above a crowded sea, knowing one bad burst could hit the wrong hull and change the entire fight. "Hog 2, cover me." "Covering. North group still active. Possible air search inland." Those words landed and stayed there. Possible air search inland. That was the truth of the moment. Hog 1 was dealing with a fast boat at sea, while the sky beyond the coast was starting to feel occupied by something not yet visible. The sight picture settled. The A-10 fired. Again, the burst was short, controlled, and exact. Water jumped around the target in tall white stripes, then tightened onto the boat's path. The craft snapped sideways, lost momentum, and veered off before it could complete its run toward the convoy lane. Not fully taken out, not broken apart, but stopped from reaching the merchant ships. And in that moment, that was enough. "South contact breaking off." For one brief second, the corridor held. Then the destroyer's net changed tone. "Possible anti-air threat inland. Recommend immediate reposition." The words came from deeper inside the ship, from operators now tracking more than the surface picture. Hog 1 pulled up from the run and turned east just enough to open his options. Hog 2 remained higher, watching the coast and the water at the same time. Then he saw it. Not the launcher, not the source, just the sign. Thin smoke trails appeared against the brightening horizon, faint at first, then clearer as they climbed from inland beyond the coast and rose into the morning air. No one on the net needed to name them. They all understood what it meant. The A-10s had entered Hormuz to control a surface fight. Now both pilots were looking toward smoke rising from shore, while fast boats still moved below,
and the destroyer fought to keep a convoy protected in the narrowest water of the strait. The trails were already climbing before anyone could fully classify them. Hog 2 saw them first. Thin gray lines rising inland beyond the coast, cutting upward through the brightening sky at a steep angle. For 1 second, they almost looked frozen against the morning light. Then the warning systems in both cockpits came alive. Sharp, immediate, and the illusion of distance vanished. "Brake! Brake! Brake!" Hog 1 did not wait for another call. He released countermeasures and snapped the A-10 into a hard defensive turn, banking low over the water as bright flares dropped behind him and burned against the blue-gray surface of the strait.
Hog 2 went the opposite direction, descending toward the sea clutter, forcing anything tracking from the coast to work through glare, wake patterns, and the tight geometry of the channel. Below them, nothing had paused. The destroyer was still screening the convoy. The merchant ships were still pressing through the lane, heavy, slow, and exposed, leaving broad white wakes that now complicated every surface track and every possible line of action. The surviving Iranian fast craft understood the opening immediately. The moment the American aircraft looked up and broke formation, the boats below began moving harder again.
Hog flight, air picture unresolved. Surface contact still active.
The report came from the destroyer's CIC, controlled, but tighter now. The ship was fighting in 2 directions at once. Its radar teams watched the coastline and the air above it. Its surface operators tracked the boats. Its bridge maintained formation with civilian traffic that could not scatter, speed away, or protect itself. Hog 1 leveled just above the water and checked the sky with one fast glance. Nothing visible. No aircraft crossing the sunline. No clear incoming shape. But that meant very little. In Hormuz, distance disappears quickly, and sometimes the most important threat is the one sensors recognize before the eye can confirm it.
Any splash? Any visual?
Hog 1 asked.
Negative visual,
Hog 2 replied.
Still painting? Still painting.
That was enough. The A-10 was built to take punishment, but toughness did not make it untouchable. Over open water, under an active tracking picture, slow speed became a problem.
The same aircraft that was perfect for reading fast boats close to the sea could become exposed fast if the fight above the water fully formed. Then the strait compressed again. One of the surviving Iranian boats, the same sudden element that had broken away moments earlier, surged back in from the edge of the merchant traffic. Another came in behind it from farther north. Not perfectly aligned, not disciplined, but close enough in timing to force a choice. It was an old narrow water tactic. Pull the defender's attention upward, then rush low while everyone is looking away. The destroyer reacted immediately. Tracking systems shifted, defensive weapons aligned. The ship's bow moved just enough to adjust its angles without exposing the convoy lane behind it. Across the radios, CIC fed bearings and closing speeds into the net with clipped, steady rhythm. South contact accelerating, second contact angling in from north-northwest, range decreasing. Hawk 2 stayed low and wide, buying space while continuing to scan inland. But Hog 1 could already see what was happening below. The 2 boats were not going to arrive together. They did not need to. One only had to force the destroyer to focus on defense, while the other reached the shipping lane. He checked fuel. The number was not critical yet, but it was bad enough that every turn now had a price. Every defensive break, every low-level correction, every extension east. The Warthogs had stayed on station through the first surface rush, through the widening swarm, and through the first unresolved air defense warning. Now the strait was demanding payment. Hog 1, recommend reposition east, Hog 2 called. Possible second emitter inland. Possible, not confirmed. Not confirmed, but not safe either. Below, the southern fast boat slammed across the chop and crossed into the outer edge of the convoy geometry. It was no longer applying pressure from a distance. It was entering the lane. The destroyer could not wait much longer. Neither could Hog 1. That was the center of the entire morning. The A-10 had entered the strait to control fast boat aggression. Instead, it was now trapped inside a layered threat picture where sea, coast, and sky were all closing at once. Too slow to escape cleanly, too close to leave the ships below uncovered. Hog 1 turned back in. "In hot, south contact!" The destroyer answered without hesitation. "Clear to engage! Convoy line priority!" He dropped lower. The water rushed up beneath the cockpit, bright and hard in the rising sun. Ahead, the fast boat was weaving hard, trying to stay unpredictable while still driving toward the most vulnerable point in the formation. Its wake cut through the larger merchant swells, disappearing and reappearing in bursts of white spray. Hog 1 ignored everything except movement and angle. No politics, no speeches, just target, lane, friendlies, and closure.
Hog 2, I need north cover.
Covering. Inland picture still active. You are clear low. The A-10 steadied. For one instant, the entire morning narrowed to a single aircraft, a single boat, and one strip of water between a warship and exposed commercial ships. The warning tones still pulsed in the cockpit. Somewhere beyond the coast, something was still searching. But down here, at sea level, the immediate danger was visible, mechanical, and only seconds away. The sight picture settled. Hog 1 released a short, controlled burst. The line cut across the water with precision. Spray rose first, then fragments and broken wake. The fast boat lurched hard, its bow sliding off angle as speed and control disappeared at the same time. There was no dramatic explosion. It simply lost the ability to finish its run. Momentum collapsed. The craft slewed broadside and began drifting out of the convoy's path. "South contact stopped!" But the moment those words crossed the net, the second boat committed from the north. It came in faster than expected, using the confusion below to hide its approach. Hog 2 saw it instantly. "North contact rushing! North contact rushing!" The destroyer shifted again, now fully committed to active defense. It held the lane. The convoy kept moving. Above them, both A-10s were low, fuel was tight, the coastal threat was still unresolved, and they were still inside the strait. Then a new voice entered the radio net. Calm, sharp, American. "Multiple US fighters inbound to your sector. Minutes out." Minutes. Not now. Not close enough. The Warthogs still had to survive the gap. In the Strait of Hormuz, a few minutes could feel longer than an entire deployment. The call changed the shape of the fight, but it did not remove the danger. US fighters were inbound. That meant the air picture above the coast would not stay one-sided for long. It meant the inland radar activity would soon have to account for faster aircraft, longer reach, and the battle space no longer centered on two low-flying A-10s over a narrow strip of water. But for the moment, none of that had arrived. The convoy was still in the strait, the destroyer was still shielding it, and the Warthogs were still alone. Hog 2 saw the northern boat first, pushing hard through broken wakes and morning glare, using the aftermath of Hog 1's last pass to close distance before anyone could fully reset the picture. It was the cleanest rush the Iranian boats had made since the first line formed. Fast, direct, time to exploit every second of confusion. "North contact still committed," Hog 2 said. "High speed, closing convoy side." Below, the destroyer adjusted its own position again, bow cutting slightly into the lane to keep the protective line between the incoming craft and the slower merchant ships behind it. On the bridge, there was no outward drama. The ship simply kept doing what escort ships are built to do: stay between danger and those who cannot protect themselves. Inside CIC, the calls continued in the same clipped rhythm that had held the morning together. "Range falling, track firm, convoy line remains priority." Hog 1 checked fuel again. Worse now. Every turn had been costly. Every defensive break over the water had burned away more margin. The A-10 was still flying clean enough to fight, but only if the pilots stopped wasting movement. There would be no extra orbit after this, no second chance to sort it out later.
Hog 2, take north, Hog 1 said. Copy, in hot. For the first time that morning, the wingman became the striker. Hog 2 rolled in from his offset position, nose dropping through the brightening air as the northern fast boat bounced violently below. The target was moving fast enough to make the pass difficult, but not fast enough to outrun the angle closing from above. The pilot held discipline through the dive, ignoring the urge to act too early. Over crowded water, the difference between control and panic was measured in fractions of a second. The destroyer held for one more breath. Then the boat crossed into the final approach line toward the convoy sector. And the decision was made. Hog 2 released a short, exact burst. Water climbed in a tight line around the craft.
Then the hull kicked sideways, as if the sea itself had struck it. The wake behind it collapsed. Its bow swung off the approach line, and the boat lost the one thing it still needed most: momentum. Instead of cutting into the merchant traffic, it drifted broadside and began sliding away from the lane. North contact braking! North contact braking! That was the moment the pattern finally changed. Not all at once, and not because of one dramatic turn.
The remaining Iranian fast craft had been testing the formation all morning, searching for a gap in timing, a hesitation, a weak point between the escort ship and the convoy, between the aircraft and the water, between warning and action. They had found nothing that held. 2 direct runs had been stopped. Another had been broken at the last possible moment. The destroyer had never given up the lane. The A-10s had never left the commercial ships uncovered, even when the coastline began to wake up against them. And now the geometry changed for the final time. Friendly air entering sector. The voice on the net was calm, but everyone understood what it meant. Somewhere high above the immediate fight, additional US air power had arrived. Faster aircraft, better positioned, ready to take control of the air picture that had been tightening from inland. Hog 1 did not need to see them yet to understand the effect. Hog 2 did not need an explanation to know that the window had closed for the boats below. The reaction on the water came quickly. The surviving Iranian craft began opening distance to the north and east. They were no longer pushing toward the convoy lane, no longer trying to split the escort formation, no longer trying to force the destroyer into a bad choice. Their wakes stretched behind them as they turned away. Those were no longer approach lines. They were withdrawal lines. Inland, the radar behavior shifted too.
The pressure that had been building through the final phase of the transit did not disappear completely, but it stopped advancing, and for that moment, that was enough. The destroyer reported the lane secure and continued escorting the convoy westward. Even then, the ship stayed disciplined. Because the most dangerous moment in any close encounter can come when one side mistakes survival for safety. The merchant vessels kept moving, heavy, slow, steady. Their course had barely changed, except for one critical fact: they were still there to hold it. Above them, Hog 1 remained on station just long enough to confirm the retreat pattern across the water. Salt haze shimmered over the strait. The morning sun was fully up now, flattening the contrast that had helped reveal the first wakes before dawn. Thin smoke from the disabled craft hung low over the sea, already beginning to drift apart in the wind.
Hog 1, fuel stayed critical for continued station time. Copy, the destroyer replied. Convoy stable, you bought the lane. You bought the lane. That was the entire mission reduced to its simplest form. Not spectacle, not domination. Time. Time for the destroyer to hold formation. Time for the merchant ships to survive the narrowest water. Time for reinforcements to arrive before the layered pressure from sea, coast, and sky could become something worse. Hog 2 climbed first, turning out as the incoming fighters took over the upper battle space. Hog 1 took one final look down at the strait before following. Below, the convoy was still moving west through Hormuz. The destroyer remained between the merchant ships and the coast. Farther out, the withdrawing boats had already shrunk into dark marks against the glittering water.
No one on the radio celebrated. The voices returned to what professionals always return to when the immediate danger passes. Fuel states, headings, system checks, spacing, handoff, recovery. One A-10 reported minor system cautions after the defensive break. The other reported no serious damage, but almost no extra fuel to waste. The destroyer logged bearings, timelines, contact status, and final maneuver data. The convoy continued on. As the sun climbed over the Strait of Hormuz, the wakes of the fast boats faded. But the record of that morning did not. 2 A-10 Warthogs had entered the strait to control a surface threat.
Instead, they found themselves inside a layered crisis of fast boats, coastal radar activity, and unresolved danger from the air. And they held the line long enough for the Navy to keep the shipping corridor open. In the Strait of Hormuz, speed mattered, power mattered. But that morning, what mattered most was who was already there when the first boats turned in.